Welcome to This Explainer. Okay, so back in 1995, an incredibly profound essay was written that completely reframes how we look at human vitality and, honestly, the passage of time itself. On the surface, it reads like this brilliant philosophical deep dive into our daily lives and the legacies we leave behind. But as we're going to see, the hidden personal story behind this text, it's just as powerful as the philosophy.
Right off the bat, the text tackles the ultimate existential heavyweight. Why are we here? The exact same question that's literally kept philosophers up at night for thousands of years. But what's cool here is that instead of taking some dry academic approach from an ivory tower, it actually looks at the sheer mechanics of human existence and compares us to the rest of the natural world. It really challenges us to look at the massive timeline of the universe, drop our own lives right in the middle of it, and figure out what on earth we're supposed to be doing with our limited hours. To put that into perspective, think of our average 80-year lifespan as just a really short vacation. It's essentially an 80-year weekend getaway in the multi-billion-year timeline of the universe. And think about it. When you go on a weekend trip, you don't just sit in an empty hotel room staring at the wall, right? No way. You have a purpose for the trip. You're there to rest, to explore, maybe learn something new. Because our time here is just so incredibly brief, we absolutely must have a specific reason for showing up to this universal weekend. We aren't just meant to be background scenery.
So, what is that purpose exactly? Well, humans are completely, uniquely driven to create. I mean, think about it. While most animals exist today exactly as they did at the dawn of time, humans arrived in a primitive world and immediately started altering it. We build, we develop, we invent crazy new tools, and we construct complex technologies. This relentless drive to leave a lasting mark, to literally shape the environment around us, is the absolute core of our existence. We are put here to be active, engaged participants in creation, not just passive observers.
Now, this actually ties directly into our modern obsession with finding happiness. We hear it all the time, right? We're constantly told that happiness should be our ultimate goal in life. But this text offers this really powerful, kind of counterintuitive insight. Pursuing happiness directly, it pretty much guarantees you're going to miss it entirely. Things like happiness, health, and love, they actually can't be end goals. They are byproducts. If you make happiness your primary target, you're probably going to end up feeling pretty empty. But if you treat it as the natural byproduct of doing meaningful work and engaging with your actual purpose, it's going to naturally follow you around.
The author uses this fantastic analogy to drive the point home, and honestly, it's pretty funny. Buying a How to Be Happy book is exactly like buying a diet book. Staring at a diet book isn't going to make you thin, just like buying a fancy cookbook won't magically turn you into a master chef. You actually have to do the work. It's this great, much-needed reality check that grounds all that heavy philosophy. The bottom line is you literally cannot consume your way to happiness. You have to produce your way there through action.
And that brings us to a super practical concept from the text. Action items. The whole premise is that we are here to cross off action items. We've got points to hit, things to build, people to help. True, lasting satisfaction comes from that continuous momentum. It's like you set a goal, you crush it, you feel that fleeting moment of happiness, and then you immediately move on to the next action item. The text explicitly warns against resting on your laurels because stopping that forward momentum is basically walking backward. Life is all about constantly moving from one meaningful objective to the very next. All of this continuous movement builds into this absolutely stunning metaphor, the shadow of life. Imagine our entire journey as a shadow cast by the sun. At dawn, when we set out on a new goal, we're well-rested, we're buzzing with energy, and our shadow is really long, which means we're feeling great satisfaction and seeing lots of visible progress. Then later, at dusk, we hit this phase of peaceful acceptance, really understanding our tiny place in the universe, and once again, our shadow lengthens out. But right between those two is a very, very dangerous phase. That dangerous phase, it's high noon. When the sun is directly overhead, it is blazing hot, and your shadow practically vanishes. This perfectly represents the difficult middle stages of life, or even just the exhausting, messy middle of a massive project. Your energy completely tanks, your progress feels totally invisible, and man, the doubts really start creeping in. At high noon, the temptation to just feel sorry for yourself and throw in the towel is at its absolute peak. You're probably asking, what is all this effort even for? But the advice here is crystal clear. Do not stop. Just keep taking small steps. Because if you stop at high noon, starting back up is going to require way more energy than just pushing through the heat. Okay, so up to this point, you might be thinking this is just a really solid philosophical essay. But if we read this purely as some theoretical manifesto, we're missing the magic entirely. We really have to ask about the hidden context here. Who was this actually written for? Like, why was a guy sitting down in 1995 drafting out his deep thoughts on the illusion of time, the dangers of high noon, and the absolute necessity of crossing off action items? Well, here is the beautiful, emotional core of our explainer today. This was not an academic paper, not even close. This was actually a father's carefully crafted, deeply loving response to his 16-year-old daughter. He wasn't trying to lecture the world. He was just trying to guide his teenage kid through a really complex phase of her own life, but doing it without preaching or dictating her choices. When you read the text knowing that, wow, every single word of advice takes on this incredibly profound, protective warmth. So here's what was happening. In 1995, his 16-year-old daughter got completely fascinated with an American movement promoting physical immortality. Basically, the idea that humans could literally figure out how to live forever. And, as a teenager just starting to grapple with the terrifying concept of mortality, this idea was hugely appealing to her. But instead of just shutting her down or telling her the group was crazy, her dad wrote this essay. He wanted to gently contrast the idea of merely living forever with the much more important concept of living with actual, actionable purpose. It's so brilliant how he navigated this. He didn't even try to invalidate her teenage obsession with avoiding death. Actually, scratch that. What he did was shift the entire center of gravity of the argument. He basically asked her, okay, sure, even if you do manage to live forever, what are you actually going to do with all that time? He completely emptied the concept of physical immortality of its power, just by showing that endless time without a purpose is really nothing but an endless void. He guided her to realize that the quality and the direction of our action items matter so much more than just the sheer quantity of our days. Now, the timeline of this text holds this incredibly poetic irony. Back in 1995, a father writes this to ground his 16-year-old daughter. Fast forward 31 years to 2026, and that exact same text is being revisited, but the reader has completely changed. That 16-year-old daughter is now a grown adult, and she's actually a mother to her own 17-year-old twin daughters. She's literally standing on the exact same side of the table her father stood on all those years ago. She's reading his words not as a searching teenager anymore, but as a guiding parent. How wild is that? Looking back at the essay 3 decades later in 2026, the father shared this amazing retrospective thought. He said, "When I read the article after 31 years, I wouldn't change a single word." He realizes that his core message, that vitality, creation, and purposeful action are the true sources of happiness, it stood the test of time perfectly. He notes that living a life of purpose doesn't mean you're giving up on joy or freedom. It's actually the opposite. It's understanding that true joy is really just the shadow cast by a life well lived. So as we wrap up this explainer, I really want to leave you with the exact same challenge that father gently placed before his daughter. Think about your own 80-year weekend in this universe. Are you just sitting around waiting for happiness to magically find you, or are you actively out there creating it? What are your specific personal action items for today? And when you eventually reach your own dusk, what kind of legacy will your shadow leave behind? Take some time to really think about that and start crossing off those items. Thanks so much for joining me, and keep learning.